Alain Marie Pascal Prost, OBE, Chevalier de la Légion d'honneur, born the 24th of February, 1955, in Lorette, Loire, is a French racing driver. A four-time Formula One Drivers' Champion, Prost has won more titles than any other driver except for Sebastian Vettel, 4 championships, Juan Manuel Fangio, 5 championships, and Michael Schumacher, 7 championships. From 1987 until 2001, Prost held the record for most Grand Prix victories. Schumacher surpassed Prost's total of 51 victories at the 2001 Belgian Grand Prix. In 1999, Prost received the World Sports Awards of the Century in the motorsport category. Prost discovered karting at the age of 14 during a family holiday. He progressed through motorsport's junior ranks, winning the French and European Formula 3 championships, before joining the Mclaren Formula One team in 1980 at the age of 24. He finished in the points on his Formula One debut in Argentina and took his first race victory at his home Grand Prix in France a year later, while he was driving for the factory Renault team. During the 1980s and early 1990s, Prost formed a fierce rivalry mainly with Ayrton Senna, but also Nelson Piquet and Nigel Mansell. In 1986, at the last race of the season, he managed to pit Mansell and Piquet of Williams to the title after Mansell retired late on in the race, and Piquet was pulled in for a late precautionary pit stop. Senna joined Prost at McLaren in 1988, and the two had a series of controversial clashes, including a collision at the 1989 Japanese Grand Prix, that gave Prost his third Drivers' Championship. A year later at the same venue they collided again, but this time Prost, driving for Ferrari, lost out. Before the end of a winless 1991 season, Prost was fired by Ferrari for his public criticism of the team. After a sabbatical in 1992, Prost joined the Williams team, prompting reigning drivers champion Mansell to leave for kart. With a competitive car, Prost won the 1993 championship and retired from Formula One driving at the end of the year. In 1997, Prost took over the French Ligier team, running it as Proust Grand-Prix, until it went bankrupt in 2002. He currently competes in the Andros Trophy, which is an ice racing championship. Prost employed a smooth, relaxed style behind the wheel, deliberately modeling himself on personal heroes, like Jackie Stewart and Jim Clark. He was nicknamed the Professor for his intellectual approach to competition. Skilled at setting up his car for race conditions, Prost would often conserve his brakes and tires early on in a race, leaving them fresher for a challenge at the end. Personal and early life. Alain Prost's signature. Alain Prost was born near the town of Saint-Chamond, close to the city of Saint-Étienne, in the department of Loire, France, to André Prost and Marie-Rose Caratcayan, born in France of Armenian descent. Prost had one younger brother called Daniel, who died of cancer in September 1986. Although short, standing at 1.67 m, 5 feet 6 in, Prost was an active, athletic child who enthusiastically took part in diverse sports, including wrestling, roller skating and football. In doing so he broke his nose several times. He considered careers as a gym instructor or a professional footballer before he discovered kart racing at the age of 14 while on a family holiday. This new sport quickly became his career of choice. Prost is married to Anne-Marie, born the 14th of February, 1955. They have 2 sons, Nicolas, born the 18th of October, 1981, and Sacha Prost, born the 30th of May, 1990. Prost also has a daughter, Victoria. As of 2013, Nicolas races in the World Endurance Championship for Rebellion Team. Prost lived in his hometown, Saint-Chamond, until he and his Renault team fell out in the early 1980s. In April 1983, the Prost family moved to St. Croix, Switzerland, and shortly after Troyens, Switzerland. They moved to Switzerland after Renault workers went to Prost's house in France and burned his Mercedes-Benz. They lived there until November 1999, when they moved to Nyon, in the same country. In 1986 or 1987, Prost was awarded the Legion honor by President François Mitterrand. Driving career. Pre-Formula One. Prost won several karting championships in his teens. In 1974 he left school to become a full-time racer, supporting himself by tuning engines and becoming a kart distributor. His prize for winning the 1975 French Senior Karting Championship was a season in French Formula Renault, a category in which he won the title, and all but one race, in 1976. Prost went on to win the 1977 Formula Renault European Championship, before moving up to Formula 3, F3, in 1978. In 1979 he won both the French and European F3 championships, by which time he was on the shopping lists of several Formula One teams. After carefully considering his options, he chose to sign with Mclaren for 1980. He surprised the British team by declining their offer of a race drive in a third car at the final race of the 1979 season at Watkins Glen, reasoning that the token effort would benefit neither him or the team. Formula One. 1980, Mclaren. Prost began his career with Mclaren, being run by Teddy Mayer, in 1980, alongside Ulsterman John Watson. On his debut in Buenos Aires he finished in 6th place, earning 1 point, something achieved by only a handful of drivers. Prost added 4 more points to his tally during the season, scoring points at Interlagos, Brands Hatch and Zandvoort. Prost finished the year 15th in the Drivers' Championship, equaling points with former world champion Emerson Fittipaldi. Despite the encouraging debut season, Prost had several accidents, breaking his wrist during practice at Kailami, and suffering a concussion during practice at Watkins Glen. At the end of the season, despite having 2 years remaining on his contract, he left Mclaren and signed with Renault. Prost has said that he left because of the large number of breakages on the car, and because he felt the team blamed him for some of the accidents. 1981-1983, Renault. 1981. Prost was partnered with fellow Frenchman René Arnoux for 1981. Motorsports author Nigel Roebuck reports that there were problems between Prost and Arnoux from the start of the season, Prost being immediately quicker than his more experienced teammate. He did not finish the first 2 Grand Prix due to collisions with Andrea de Cesaris in Long Beach and Didier Pironi at Jacaré-Pagua, but scored his first podium finish at Buenos Aires. He also did not finish in the next 4 races, and then won his first Formula One race at his home Grand Prix in France, finishing 2 seconds ahead of his old teammate John Watson. For Prost, his debut victory was memorable mostly for the change it made in his mindset. "Before, you thought you could do it," he said. "Now you know you can." Prost led from the start the next 5 races, and won 2 more races during the season, took his first pole position in Germany, and finished on the podium every time he completed a race distance. He finished 5th in the Drivers' Championship, 7 points behind champion Nelson Piquet. Prost's 1983 Renault 340, in which he came close to winning his first championship. 1982. Prost won the first 2 Grand Prix of the 1982 season in South Africa, where Prost recovered from losing a wheel, and Brazil, where he finished 3rd, but was awarded the win after Piquet, 1st, and Keke Rosberg, 2nd, were disqualified. He finished in the points on 4 other occasions, but did not win again. Despite retiring from 7 races, Prost improved on his Drivers' Championship position, finishing in 4th, but with 9 fewer points than the previous year. His relationship with Arnoux deteriorated further after the French Grand Prix. Prost believes that Arnoux, who won the race, went back on a pre-race agreement to support Prost during the race. His relationship with the French media was also poor. He has since commented that when I went to Renault the journalists wrote good things about me, but by 1982 I had become the bad guy. I think, to be honest, I had made the mistake of winning. The French don't really like winners. 1983. Arnoux left Renault in 1983, and American Eddie Cheever replaced him as Prost's partner. Prost earned a further 4 victories for Renault during the season, and finished second in the Drivers' Championship, 2 points behind Nelson Piquet. Piquet and the Brabham team overhauled Prost and Renault in the last few races of the season. Prost, who felt the team had been too conservative in developing the car, found himself increasingly at odds with Renault's management, who made him the scapegoat for failing to win a championship. In addition to that, the French fans recalled the bitter fight that had caused their favorite, Arnoux, to leave the team. Renault fired Prost only 2 days after the last race of the season. He re-signed for Mclaren for the 1984 season within days and moved his family home to Switzerland. 1984-1989, Mclaren. Prost in 1984. 1984. The Frenchman joined double world champion Niki Lauda at McLaren, now being run by Ron Dennis, in 1984, driving the McLaren MP4/2 using TAG Porsche engines. He lost the World Championship to Lauda in the final race by half a point, despite winning 7 races to Lauda's 5. The half point came from the Monaco Grand Prix, where Prost had been leading, albeit with Ayrton Senna and Stefan Bellof closing on him rapidly, when officials stopped the race at half distance due to heavy rain, which was controversial as the red flag was produced as Senna overtook Prost. Under Formula One regulations, Prost received only half of the 9 points normally awarded for a victory. 1985. Alain Prost driving the McLaren MP4/2B at the 1985 German Grand Prix. Cockpit of Alain Prost's F1 McLaren TAG Porsche Turbo, from his first championship year. In 1985 Prost became the first French Formula One world champion. He won 5 of the 16 Grand Prix during the season. He had also won the San Marino Grand Prix, but was disqualified after his car was found to be 2 kilograms underweight in post-race scrutineering. Prost finished 20 points ahead of his closest rival, Michel Alboreto. Prost's performance in 1985 earned him the Légion d'honneur distinction in France. 1986. Niki Lauda retired for good at the end of 1985, and was replaced at McLaren by 1982 champion Keke Rosberg for 1986. Prost successfully defended his title, despite his car struggling against the Honda-powered Williams cars driven by Nelson Piquet and Nigel Mansell. Until the latter stages of the final race of the 1986 season, the Australian Grand Prix, Prost appeared set to finish second in the championship, behind Mansell. Prost had the same amount of wins as Piquet, but he had 4 second places to Piquet's 3, thus placing him second before the final race. While running third behind Piquet and Prost, Mansell suffered a tire failure at high speed and crashed out. The Williams team pitted his teammate Piquet in to change tires as a safety precaution, while Prost had already pitted and held the lead to the checkered flag. Another memorable race that year for Prost was at the San Marino Grand Prix. He was cruising to victory when his car began to run out of fuel 3 corners from the checkered flag. Frantically weaving the car back and forth to slosh the last drops of fuel into the pickup, he managed to keep it running just long enough to creep over the line and win the race. Prost commented after the race that when his car started running dry he immediately thought to himself, "Shit, I am going to lose this race again," referring to his 1985 disqualification at Imola. It happened again at the German Grand Prix. While running in 4th position, Prost's car ran out of fuel on the finishing straight of the last lap. Instead of retiring at a time in the season when points were critical, Prost got out of his car and tried to push it to the finish, to great applause from the crowd. The finish line was too far, though, and he never reached it. He was eventually classified 6th in the race, as the 7th place car, the Brabham BMW of Derek Warwick, was a lap behind. 1987. With Rosberg retiring from Formula One at the end of 1986 season, underrated Swede Stefan Johansson filled the McLaren seat alongside Prost for the 1987 season. Even though McLaren had introduced the new MP4/3 after 3 seasons with the MP4/2 model, the tag engines were not the force they had been previously, though he challenged Piquet and Mansell almost until the end, winning 3 races, and breaking Jackie Stewart's record for race victories, by winning for the 28th time at the Portuguese Grand Prix. Prost considers his win in the opening round in Brazil as his best and most rewarding race ever. The Williams Hondas had been dominant during qualifying, and Prost started 5th on the grid with a time 3 seconds slower than Mansell's pole time. Knowing he didn't have the qualifying speed, he instead worked on his race set-up, and with everyone else going for a high downforce set-up, the Frenchman went the other way. The setup meant less tire wear, thanks to slower speeds in the corners, while going fast down the straights. With his car having less tire wear than his rivals, Prost was able to get through the 61 laps of the abrasive Jacaré-Pagua circuit with only 1 stop compared to the 2 or more by his rivals. Prost finished 40 seconds in front of Piquet, with Johansson a further 16 seconds back in third. When you win a race like this, the feeling is very, very good. There have been times when I have been flat out to finish 6th, but you can't see that from the outside. In 1980 I finished 3 or 4 times in 7th place. I pushed like mad, yet everyone was gathered around the winner and they were thinking that I was just trundling around. But that's motor racing. So in fact the only thing you can judge in this sport is the long term. You can judge a career or a season, but not one race. Alain Prost sometime after the race transcript of recording from 4e.com, paragraphs 19 and 20. Prost finished the 1987 season in 4th place, 30 points behind champion Nelson Piquet. 1988. Prost driving for McLaren at the 1988 Canadian Grand Prix. Despite Nelson Piquet winning the 1987 Drivers' Championship and Williams winning the Constructors' Championship, Honda decided not to supply the team with their engines, partly due to Williams' refusal to dump Nigel Mansell and hire Japanese driver and Honda test driver Satoru Nakajima, who debuted with Lotus in 1987, and instead supplied the McLaren team for 1988. Prost had convinced Ron Dennis to sign Ayrton Senna to a 3-year contract, which played a role in luring Honda. Senna's ability had been highly regarded by the Japanese giant when using their engines with Lotus in 1987, and both were keen to continue their association. However, this began the rivalry that pushed 2 of the sport's greatest drivers to unprecedented heights of success and controversy. McLaren Honda dominated the season, winning 15 out of 16 races. Prost finished 1st or 2nd in every race other than his 2 retirements at Silverstone and Monza. He won 7 races and in total outscored his new teammate Ayrton Senna by 11 points, despite Senna winning 1 more race than Prost. However, only the 11 best results from the season counted toward the championship total, and this gave Senna the title by 3 points. Prost went on to be a proponent of essentially the 1990 scoring system, all results counting to the final results with the winner scoring 10, not 9, points. 1989. McLaren's domination continued throughout 1989, and the Prost-Senna struggle for supremacy put them on a collision course. Mutual admiration turned to all-out hatred, with the Frenchman accusing his Brazilian teammate of dangerous driving and of receiving more than a fair share of attention from both McLaren and Honda. For his part, Senna accused Prost of being in the pocket of FISA's French president Jean-Marie Balestre. The animosity between the 2 drivers came to a head at Tronto and San Marino. The drivers made an agreement between them that whoever won the start would not be challenged by the other going into the first turn, in this case, the Tosa Bend, on the Imola circuit. Prost kept to the agreement after Senna won the first start. Prost, however, won the restart, caused by Gerhard Berger's fiery crash in his Ferrari, but but was passed by Senna under brakes for Tosa. Prost labeled the Brazilian as dishonest and wanted nothing more to do with him. Senna denied any such agreement had ever existed between himself and Prost, but the Frenchman's claim was backed up by Marlborough's John Hogan, who had been present at the time. Their embittered season ended as many pundits had feared. In the Japanese Grand Prix, at the end of lap 46, Senna made his move at the casino chicane. Prost, turning into the corner, turned into his teammate's path, resulting in a collision, and the cars sliding interlocked down the escape road. Prost, thinking the World Championship was over, climbed out of his stalled car. To separate the cars, the marshals pushed Senna's Mclaren backwards onto the track. This left it in a dangerous position, so they pushed it forwards again. As they did so, Senna bump-started the engine. He drove through the chicane and rejoined. The nose of his car was damaged, and he had to pit, but he rejoined only 5 seconds behind the Benetton of Alessandro Nannini. On lap 50, Ayrton sliced past Nannini at the chicane to take the lead, and won the race. But it was Nannini who appeared on the top step of the podium, race officials having excluded Senna for missing the chicane. Mclaren appealed the decision, but the FIA Court of Appeal not only upheld the decision, but fined Senna 0,000 and gave him a suspended 6-month ban. Thus Prost clinched his third driving title in controversial circumstances. However, Prost had the firm belief that Honda and Ron Dennis viewed Senna as the future of the team. Prost recalled that by the Italian Grand Prix he had one car, with maybe 4 or 5 mechanics, while his teammate had 2 cars and 20 people around him. Before the race, Prost, who had announced in July 1989 that he would depart from McLaren, announced he was joining Ferrari. Although Prost was forced to make a public apology to both McLaren and Honda over his Monza comments, he received support from Nigel Mansell, who would be his 1990 teammate at Ferrari, and former teammate Rosberg, who claimed that once it became known they would not be using the Japanese engines the next season, their Honda engines did not seem to work as well as was once normal. As 1989 wore on, Prost continually claimed his Honda V10s were not producing the same amount of power as those in Senna's car. It actually got to the point where Honda F1 boss Osamu Goto felt compelled to speak to the specialist British media on the matter. He claimed that Senna's foot-tapping style with the accelerator helped keep the raw 109's revs up where the power was, while Prost's smoother style dropped the engines into low revs where they had to pick up problem. Apparently the talk was convincing until most of those present noticed Goto continually called them Ayrton and Prost respectively. 1990-1991, Ferrari. 1990. Prost practicing for his first event for Ferrari, the 1990 United States Grand Prix. The Frenchman replaced Gerhard Berger at Ferrari, and was partnered with Britain's Nigel Mansell. For 1990, Berger took Prost's seat at McLaren. As reigning world champion, Prost took over as the team's lead driver, and was said to have played on Mansell's inferiority complex. Mansell recalls one incident where at the 1990 British Grand Prix, the car he drove didn't handle the same as in the previous race, where he had taken pole position, and later found out from team mechanics that Prost saw Mansell as having a superior car, and had them swapped without Mansell knowing. Prost won 5 races for Ferrari that year, in Brazil, Mexico, France, Britain, and Spain. Notable among these was the Mexican Grand Prix, where he won after starting in 13th position. In both the Mexican and Spanish races, he led Mansell to Ferrari 1-2 finishes. The championship once again came to the penultimate round of the season in Japan, with Prost trailing his McLaren adversary, Ayrton Senna, by 9 points. As in 1989, a controversial collision between the two settled the race. At the first corner, Senna, as admitted a year later, intentionally drove his race car into Prost, taking them both out of the race, and sealing the title in his favor. "What he did was disgusting," Prost said. "He is a man without value." Prost finished the season 7 points behind Senna, and his Ferrari team were runners-up to McLaren. 1991. Prost at the 1991 United States Grand Prix. Mansell left the Scuderia due to his unstable relationship with Prost to rejoin Williams for the 1991 Formula One season. Mansell's replacement was Frenchman Jean Alesi, who had been impressive during the previous 2 years at Tyrrell. Ferrari had entered a downturn, partially as their famous V12 engine was no longer competitive against the smaller, lighter and more fuel-efficient V10s of their competitors. The Ferrari chassis, despite major revision by the French Grand Prix, F643, was also not up to the level of the Mclaren and the Williams models. Prost won no races, only getting onto the podium 5 times. He took this out on the team, publicly criticizing the team and the Ferrari 643, and subsequently had his contract terminated before the end of the season, immediately prior to the Australian Grand Prix. He was replaced by Italian driver Gianni Morbidelli for the final race of the 1991 season, and by another Italian, Ivan Capelli, for the following season. Despite being sacked, Prost received a significant payment from Ferrari to not drive for any other team. It was the second time in his career that Alain Prost had been fired by a factory-backed team for his public criticism of the team car, having been fired under similar circumstances by Renault at the end of the 1983 season. In Japan, the car was like a horrible truck to drive. No pleasure at all. I've underlined the defects of the Ferrari throughout the season, but no one has listened to a word. Alain Prost describing the 643 after the 1991 Japanese Grand Prix. 1991 was the first time since his debut year in 1980 in which Alain Prost did not win a Formula One Grand Prix. 1993, Williams. Prost driving for Williams in the 1993 British Grand Prix. Prost went on to a sabbatical year in 1992, which was dominated by Nigel Mansell in a Williams Renault. Prost performed pre-season testing for Ligier in 1992, and later turned down an offer to drive for the team. After hearing that Prost would be his teammate again in 1993, Mansell left Williams to race in the kart series. The Frenchman had a clause in his contract which prevented rival Ayrton Senna from joining the team that year. Prost was part of a new-look driver line-up at Williams, with test driver Damon Hill coming in to replace Riccardo Patrese, who had left to join Benetton. Prost won his fourth and final title, but in a year where he was regularly challenged by teammate Hill and Ayrton Senna. Shortly before the Portuguese Grand Prix in October 1993, Prost announced he would not defend his world title, as the clause in the Frenchman's contract did not extend to 1994 and Senna would be able to join Williams for the upcoming season, and instead opted to retire as the driver with the record for most Grand Prix victories, a record which stood for almost a decade. On the podium in Adelaide, in 1993, Prost's last race, he and Senna embraced, and it was as if now that Prost was no longer a rival, Senna saw no reason for any more hostility. Prost was surprised by the gesture. Prost's performances earned him an OBE. German Michael Schumacher broke Prost's record of 51 Grand Prix wins during the 2001 season. However, the Frenchman still holds the records for the most Grand Prix starts in turbo-powered cars, 126, most wins at home Grand Prix, 6 at the French Grand Prix, and wins with most different teams, for Renault, McLaren, Ferrari, and Williams. He also shares the record for starting every race of the season from the front row, 16 in 1993, with Ayrton Senna in 1989, and Damon Hill in 1996. He is also thus far the most recent Frenchman to win his home Grand Prix. Rivalry with Ayrton Senna. Prost's battles with Ayrton Senna were particularly notable. The rivalry originated in 1988, when Senna joined Prost at the McLaren team. The most notable event during the season between the two occurred during the Portuguese Grand Prix, where Senna tried to block Prost from taking the lead by forcing the Frenchman to run close to the pit wall, Prost managed to edge Senna outwards, taking the lead as they went into the first corner, but he remained angered by the Brazilian's maneuver. The rivalry intensified after the 1989 San Marino Grand Prix, where the two drivers had an agreement that neither would get in each other's way to the first corner, cf 1982 San Marino Grand Prix. At the start, Senna got away in the lead and Prost followed him through the first corner without getting in Senna's way. Gerhard Berger's crash on lap 4 stopped the race. At the restart, it was Prost this time that got away the better of the two, but Senna forced his way past Prost in the first corner, breaking the pair's agreement at the start of the race, leaving the Frenchman furious with Senna. Senna argued it was the restart. Prost himself was angered by McLaren apparently favoring Senna because of Senna's better relationship with engine supplier Honda, so he announced mid-season that he had signed to race for Ferrari the following season. The rivalry reached its peak at the end of 1989, when the title was to be decided between Senna and Prost at Suzuka. The two McLarens collided at the Cagio Triangle chicane when Prost blocked an attempted pass by Senna. Prost walked away, while Senna returned to the track. Senna went on to win the race, but was later disqualified in a highly controversial ruling over his path back to the track. After an unsuccessful appeal by McLaren, the Brazilian received a further $0,000 fine and a 6-month suspension, leading Senna to accuse FIA President Jean-Marie Balestre of favoring his compatriot Prost. Senna's disqualification meant that it was mathematically impossible for him to overhaul Prost's points total, and so the 1989 championship went to the Frenchman. There has been much debate as to whether Senna was overambitious in his overtaking maneuver, whether Prost intentionally ran into Senna, or whether the collision was simply a racing incident between two teammates who were embittered with each other. The following season saw the two drivers collide again, with Senna leading Prost, now in a Ferrari, in the World Drivers' Championship. Prost qualified second for the penultimate race of the season in Suzuka with Senna on pole. Between the end of qualifying and race day, pole position was switched to the other side of the track without explanation. Senna complained that no longer being on the racing line, his side of the grid was dirty, meaning he would get less grip, and therefore a slower start compared to Prost, who had been moved to the clean side of the grid. The Brazilian's appeal was rejected. At the start of the race, Prost got the better start of the two, but whilst braking for the first corner, Senna refused to back off and collided with Prost at 160 mph, 260 km/h, clinching the title for the Brazilian. Prost almost retired from the sport, saying what he did was disgusting. He is a man without value. A year later, Senna admitted that the move was premeditated, in retaliation for the collision at the chicane on the same course the previous year. There was another controversial incident in 1991. Prost's inferior Ferrari was unable to put up the challenge regularly to Senna's front-running McLaren. At the German Grand Prix at Hockenheim, Prost battled Senna for fourth place. However, he felt Senna defended too aggressively, and at the first chicane forced Prost to take avoiding action by using the escape road. Prost stalled his car, rejoining the race. Coincidentally, Senna ran out of fuel on the last lap at the very same point. The Frenchman took a sabbatical in 1992, after being fired from Ferrari for publicly criticizing the car and the team, while the Brazilian struggled as McLaren was no longer competitive with Williams. Prost announced his signing with Williams for the upcoming 1993 season. Senna had wanted to join Williams too, as they were the most competitive, but Prost had a clause in his contract forbidding the Brazilian as a teammate. An infuriated Senna called the Frenchman a coward during a press conference at Estoril, and decried his unwillingness to compete for the Drivers' Championship on equal sporting terms. I think if Prost wants to be called the sole champion, 3 times world champion, come back in a sportive way, maybe win another championship, he should be sportive. The way he's doing, he's behaving like a coward. And if he wants to be sportive, he must be prepared to race anybody, at any condition, at equal terms. During the 1993 season, Prost and Senna continued their on-track rivalry. Prost was escorted by police to the Interlagos circuit for the 1993 Brazilian Grand Prix due to the hostility of Brazilians towards him. The two continued their on-track battles at Silverstone, where Senna aggressively defended his position against Prost. At Prost's last Grand Prix, the 1993 Australian Grand Prix, he was pulled up by Senna onto the top step of the podium for an embrace. On the 1st of May, 1994, Ayrton Senna was killed during the San Marino Grand Prix. Prost was a pallbearer at the Brazilian's funeral. Speaking 4 years after the Brazilian's death, Prost told Nigel Roebuck that he had always refused to speak about him. When Senna died, Prost stated that a part of himself had died also because their careers had been so bound together. Senna had also felt the same when Prost had retired at the end of 1993, when he admitted to a close friend that he had realized how much of his motivation had come from fighting with Prost. Only a couple of days before his death, when filming an in-car lap of Imola for French television channel TF1, he greeted Prost by the pundit on the channel, "A special hello to our dear friend Alain. We all miss you, Alain." Prost said that he was amazed and very touched by the comment. Comparison with teammates. During the course of his career, season by season, Prost beat nearly all his teammates on total points, including 5 world champions. The only exceptions were in 1984 when Niki Lauda won by half a point, and in Prost's first F1 season, when he was beaten by John Watson. In 1988, although Prost scored more points in total than his teammate Ayrton Senna, only the best 11 of 16 results counted towards the championship, which Senna won. Year Prost points teammates 1980. 5-6 John Watson 1981 43-11 René Arnoux 1982 34-28 René Arnoux 1983 57-22 Eddie Cheever 1984 71.5 72 Niki Lauda 1985 73 76 14 Niki Lauda 1986 72 74 22 Keke Rosberg 1987 46 30 Stefan Johansson 1988 87 100 5 90 94 Ayrton Senna 1989 76 81 60 Ayrton Senna 1990 71 73 37 Nigel Mansell 1991 34 21 Gene Alesi 1993 99 69 Damon Hill. Helmet. Prost uses a helmet design based on the 3 colors of the French flag, those being blue, white and red, along with his name along the side. During his early career, however, Prost used a basic design of white all over with some blue detail around the visor, blue helmet with a white 180 flipped Y, and red lines in the lower branch of the flipped Y, and in the upper branch, surrounding the top. During Prost's time at Renault, he used more blue details, most notably around the rear of his helmet. Prost's helmet changed in 1985, as his helmet now had the blue detail around the front, surrounding the visor, with also a blue stripe on the side region, making the white area become a P, and a white ring with red lines surrounding the top, forming a white circle with a blue half in the rear of the top. Prost kept a similar design for his entry at Ferrari and Williams. Sometimes, Prost used variants of his helmet design. In 2007 he used his original design, but with the circle top all red, and a red line in the lower chin area. In 2010, he used a pearl white helmet with silver flames, and a blue-white red-white-blue stripe trespassing the visor, designed by Cal's Design. Later life. During 1994 and 1995, Prost worked as TV pundit for the French TV channel TF1. He also worked for Renault as a Puerto Rico man. Prost went back to his old team Mclaren, working as a technical advisor. He also completed Etape du Tour, an annual mass participation bike ride that takes place on a stage of the Tour de France. Although not an official race, riders fight hard for places. Prost finished 12th in his category, 42nd overall out of over 5,000 riders. Proust Grand-Prix. During 1989, Prost began to contemplate starting his own team, as his relationship with his McLaren teammate, Ayrton Senna, had turned sour. Prost and John Barnard, formerly chief designer at McLaren, came close to founding a team in 1990, but a lack of sponsorship meant that this was not possible, so Prost moved to Ferrari. After falling out with the Italian team, at the end of 1991, Prost found himself without a drive for 1992, after the failure of extensive negotiations with Guy Légion about buying his Légion team. Prost decided to join Williams for 1993. In 1995, when Prost was working for Renault, people began to assume that a Prost-Renault team would be formed in the near future. Renault refused Prost's request to supply engines for his team, ending the speculation. Olivier Panis driving for the Proust Grand-Prix team at the 1998 Canadian Grand Prix. On the 13th of February, 1997, Prost bought the Légion team from Flavio Briatore and renamed it Proust Grand-Prix. The day after he bought the team, Prost signed a 3-year deal with French car manufacturer Peugeot, who would supply the team with engines for the 1998 season through the 2000 season. For the team's first season, Prost kept one of Légion's 1996 drivers, Olivier Panis, who had won the Monaco Grand Prix the previous year. Japanese driver Shinji Nakano was signed to partner Panis. The team raced with the Mugen Honda engines used by Légion the previous season. Things looked promising at the start of the season, as the team picked up 2 points on its Grand Prix debut in Australia, when Olivier Panis finished 5th. The team scored a further 13 points before Panis broke his leg in an accident during the Canadian Grand Prix. He was replaced by Minardi's Jarno Trulli. From there, things started to go downhill slightly. The team scored only 5 points during Panis' recovery. The Frenchman came back at the end of the season to race the final 3 Grand Prix. Prost GP finished 6th in the Constructors' Championship in its first season, with 21 points. Prost became the president of Proust Grand-Prix at the start of 1998. With Peugeot supplying the engines for Prost GP, Mugen Honda decided to supply the Jarno team. Prost GP scored a single point during the season, Jarno Trulli finishing 6th in Belgium. 1999 was a crucial year for Prost GP. Prost hired John Barnard as a technical consultant, Barnard's B3 Technologies company helping walk Big OS, and the design of the AP02. Panis and Trulli agreed to stay on with the team for the season. While the car did not prove to be a major concern, the Peugeot engine proved to be heavy and unreliable. Peugeot's final year as Prost's engine supplier in 2000 saw some optimism. Prost hiring his 1991 Ferrari teammate Gene Alesi to drive the lead car and German Nick Heidfeld, who had won the 1999 Formula 3000 championship, to partner him. The season proved to be yet another disastrous one, with the AP03 proving to be unreliable and ill-handling. Things weren't helped when both drivers collided with each other in the Austrian Grand Prix. Newly hired technical director Alan Jenkins fired midway through the year. Prost restructured the team, hiring Joan Villadelprat as the managing director and replacing Jenkins with Henri Durand as the team's new technical director. 2001 saw some much-needed optimism for the team as Ferrari agreed to be the team's engine supplier for the season, the team now moving in the right direction. But the money ran out at the start of the 2002 season and Prost was out of business, leaving debts of around $30 million. After Proust Grand-Prix. During 2002, Prost spent time with his family and competed in 8 bicycle races, finishing 3rd in the Granit Montlose. The Frenchman raced in the Andros Ice Race Series in 2003, finishing 2nd in the championship behind Yvonne Muller. He also became an ambassador for Uniroyal, a position he would keep until May 2006. Prost continued to compete in the Andros Trophy, winning the title with Toyota in 2006/07. 2007/08, and with Dacia in 2011/2012. However, Prost has also stated that he has no intention of racing at the famous Le Mans 24-hour sports car race held annually near Le Mans, France, due to concerns about the skill and experience of other drivers along the nature of the multiple class racing that occurs at Le Mans, a factor that was supported by Scotsman and two-time Le Mans winner Alan McNish's horror crash in the Audi R18 in the 2011 24 Hours of Le Mans. For the 2010 Formula One season, the sporting regulations were changed so that a former driver sits on the stewards panel. Prost was the first such driver to take on this role at the 2010 Bahrain Grand Prix. Prost also took part in the Race of Champions in 2010, a race organized for legends of motorsport to compete in equal machinery. In February 2012, Prost was named as Renault's new international ambassador, representing the company in sports demonstrations and at events organized or attended by Renault. In March 2012, Prost traveled to South Africa and successfully completed the Absa Cape Hepakate Day stage mountain bike race with partner Sebastian Vettel. He intends to ride for a second time during the 2013 event.